Hi everyone, my name is Ineza, and this research essay involves youths and risk-taking represented in contemporary cinema. I will first briefly share the topic at hand in a broader context, followed by drawing two feature-length films to analyze youths and risk-taking behavior. I will then conclude on the patterns identified from these two films before summing it all up. So, I'll start by sharing an overview of youths and the concept of risk-taking. Risks, as Ellen Franz elaborates, operates in a wide range of places and practices in society. It involves looking at momentous activities such as financial management, or on the other hand, forms of behavior seen as more reckless such as binge drinking, substance abuse, or fighting. Our focus today will be for the latter, where youths are shown to be involved in risky activities that are shown on screens targeted at other youths. Ultimately, the aim of this research is to analyze observations on drug taking, alcohol consumption, or other lawless behavior. Although this brings negative implications such as making other youths conform to hegemonic ideals, it can be argued that this display of risks attempt to dissuade consequential behaviors. One of the two films used to analyze youth risk-taking behavior is 2014's Neighbours, or known as Bad Neighbours in some countries. Starring Zac Efron and Seth Rogen, this American comedy follows the plot of how an adult couple came into conflict with a frat house known for their outrageous parties that have recently moved into their neighborhood, leading them to an all-out war. Throughout the plot, the frat house is seen to bring inconvenience, disruptions, and discomfort to the adults through risk-taking behaviors such as partying, drinking, fighting, and drug-taking, instantly positioning them as the antagonist figure of the film. Based on this itself, there are a few allegories to unpack here. Immediately, we are able to identify the separation of lifestyle patterns and culture of the adults and fraternity. The adults as responsible parents with an early bedtime and with a set of moral compass, whereas the youths in a frat house are consistently displaying associations to a culture of intoxication, through scenes that show them that they are playing hard. Firstly, this separation of lifestyle denotes the clear difference in comparison between the frat house, of which represents youths in the transitional phase of college, and adults in parenthood. Extending this idea is how the conflict is largely driven by what Cohen describes as moral panic. Cohen argues that young people in youth cultures, which in this case is the frat house, are subjected to public scrutiny that positions themselves as dangerous to either themselves or their surroundings. In other words, Mac and his family showed signs of moral panic and therefore found the need to intervene in order to terminate these risks. Secondly, the contrast between Mac's family and the frat house echoes Zinn's theory of risk phenomena as deeply rooted in social processes. This refers to the process in which individuals take risks according to their social or cultural conditions, such as the overall attitude embedded in their social groups. For instance, the frat boys influence each other in decisions when it comes to risk-taking, for they share similar behavioral traits such as their love for weed, partying and drinking, which essentially builds a sort of brotherhood.
Let's fill it with dreams. We are going to end the year with the most legendary rager of all time. I'm talking even bigger than last year's White Trash Bash.
Seems like an impossible feat.
This differs largely to Mac and his wife, where their main vision is to build a peaceful, loving, and mature home. Well, sort of. Additionally, different social scenes play a role in determining the extent to which people involved take risks. This is also seen when Mac and his wife are only seen consuming alcohol when they are socializing with the frat boys, further illustrating the point that individual choices gets distorted and changed according to the social settings and conditions they are in. Another notable observation is the way Dave Franco's character Pete and Teddy differ in their control over their outcomes when taking risks. Although they share a common motive, which is to join Delta Psi's Hall of Fame by throwing a massive end-of-the-year party, they seem to be on different paths in their education. Relating to this is Tulloch and Lapton's notion of control and agency, where on an individualized level, risks can largely differ based on the extent of self-control and considerations they have. In this scene, Pete is seen excelling in a career fair, while Teddy did not so well.
GPA. I like low twos. I'm just kidding. High ones. We're actually looking for candidates that are a little more academically inclined, so you could have a nice day.
Speaking of Dave Franco, another movie he was in is 2016's American techno thriller adventure film, Nerve. In this film, V, played by Emma Roberts along with other youths, partake in theirs for monetary rewards. V ends up with Ian and goes on an adventure taking on challenges that progressively gets more dangerous and life-threatening. Similar to representations in Bad Neighbors, Nerve conveys how risky behavior is largely driven by social forces and motivations. Here we look closer at V's character. The film starts off with her in contemplation of her future in her dream college. Her best friend, Sydney, introduces the game Nerve to her and insinuates that the game was too risky for her personality, which motivated her to participate.
You so much, V, but you're a watcher. So watch me do it for you.
No, Sid. No. Sid, no.
This decision, however, could be inferred that V felt that it was a social risk, threatened by how she might be deemed as too weak by her friends. Bankston and Revan describes that risk-taking is not entirely associated with physical or cognitive risks, but a worry of having a bad reputation. In this case, V sets aside the physical risks of the game and focuses on challenging the perception of others. Adding on, the overall decision-making of youths in a film conveys how they weigh up the cost and benefit of taking a particular risk. It becomes apparent in the film that these players engaged in life-risking dares as the social and monetary rewards outweigh the possibility of physical harm. For instance, Sydney was not hesitant walking this ladder if that is what it takes to be looked up by her watchers. Secondly, this particular scene relates to a culture of intoxication similar to the frat boys in Bad Neighbors. However, Sydney was positioned in a slightly more complex manner. Through the lens of feminism, Griffin describes how female figures such as Sydney is characterized by an uneasy and often contradictory combination of pleasure and having chaotic fun. This communicates alcohol's ability to increase self-confidence, enhance sociability, and pursue personal freedom. This is evidently shown when Sydney gets drunk and betrays her best friend by making advancements to her crush. The synthesis of these two analyses could be supported by Zinn's elaboration of risk-taking motive as a means to an end, which is how risk could be driven by a particular purpose. This meant that V's aim was to seek material gain in order to develop a valid identity. Not only did her participation in Nerve prove her peers wrong, but it allowed her to decide what she wanted for the future. It implied that the risks she took were part of her self-growth and ultimately motivated her to take on bigger risks, accepting her dream college. So before I sum up these findings, let's trace back to the first idea. Movies tend to associate risk-taking with deviance and even might encourage youth audiences to conform to these hegemonic ideals. Sonia Sin explains that movies are sources for observational learning and provides information about the prevalence, acceptability, and functions of risk in social lives. However, what Sin fails to mention is the extent in which showing negative results of risk-taking behavior might in fact deter them from the ideal altogether. Take alcohol and drug consumption for instance. In both films, the role of these devices, as Lee would put it, frames individuals into thinking a certain way about alcohol and drug usage, essentially forming an opinion on the individual's behalf. This, however, disregards individualized agencies in different social settings that also exist in different dimensions of risk. For instance, Teddy's non-stop partying and excitement found in risk-taking resulted in a college dropout, whereas for V, she heads on to college due to that very same reason. And with that, the interpretation of such representations vary across individuals. So in summary, both films, Bad Neighbors and Nerve, allowed an observation of youth and risk-taking in both forms, physical and social risks. In general, the way these youths were positioned is fair, due to how fluid the definitions of risk can be perceived as. In addition, the results of risk taken in both films were clearly shown through their voluntary risk-taking. In other words, the process of their decision-making of these actions have proven to be shaped by different motives such as a form of routinized behavior or just to seek excitement. In the end, it is based on an individual's experience of control and reflexivity that allows negotiating between the cost and benefit of risk-taking.